Hey guys, so today is October 31st and it is a Wednesday. As we've been seeing almost every other Wednesday, we've been seeing some sort of balance patch, and I really like that. I like to see these small tweaks, but this time I actually thought it was a little bit of a April Fool's, and I'll explain why in a little bit. But moving on, let's just kind of shoot through this as fast as possible. It's a small balance patch change, so let's get through it quickly, so you guys don't need to like sit here and watch forever. There's not a lot that's being changed. While there's a lot of heroes, some of the changes are very small, so we'll move right into it. Falstad and Dahaka are seeing their globals cooldown increased, meaning they can global a lot less often. They're also seeing some increases to their global cooldown reduction when you get to your level 20, but generally it's still really, really long cooldowns. My concern about this change is that both Falstad and Dahaka are seeing relatively lower win rates, even though they have this global pressure, which means that they're doing this to balance the competitive aspect of it. However, they're not increasing any of the abilities of the heroes. For example, if you're going to nerf Falstad's global, he's nowhere near as strong as like a Phoenix in team fights. So why are we just nerfing his global without buffing any of the other details? Because he's weaker because he has that global. Same with Dahaka. He's weaker because he has that global. So we need to see the buffs with it as well, or else we're just going to see a general lowered power from these heroes, lower win rates from these heroes. Either way, it's a change that they're trying to make. Then Kel'Thuzad is looking a little bit more lively today, as he's seeing a buff on his version of Pyroblast. So this lively Kel'Thuzad is seeing some buffs: cooldown reduction, mana cost reduction, and root increase for his blue Pyroblast. And then we're seeing the Barb change is getting a little bit of a nerf, so I think they don't like that blow up mentality anymore. They're buffing the Ice Cold, which is level 7 talent from his passive, and they're buffing the Icy Grasp as well. So I think they're trying to get people out of the mentality of Kel'Thuzad has to be a pull two people together and blow them up, and showing that, hey, Kel'Thuzad can do other things as well, and he can also be kind of a showstopper with a really cool ultimate ability. But it's going to be a little while before people transition as the old playstyle. They're not really completely destroying the old playstyle. They're just trying to show people that there's another playstyle. Lunar is getting a little bit of a buff from her level 7 choking pollen's talent. Just more damage and more damage. Pretty simple. Zagar is getting a quick change where she's losing the maximum number of active Nidus Worms from 10 to 4. If you were to put a new Nidus Worm, your oldest Nidus Worm will be changed. This is an interesting change for me. I think that when they make this change, they should lower the cooldown just a tad, only because if you ever want to replace a Nidus Worm, you might need to have one destroyed, and you can't purposely destroy them. So while this change won't affect a lot of people in the higher level of play, because the way that they place the Nidus Worms is two in the furthest lanes, one at your core, and then one in an aggressive position that usually dies. All of those Niduses will not be affected in the higher competitive areas, but in some of the lower areas where you might put Niduses in multiple areas in really long games, this will be generally a nerf. Lily seeing a healing reduction, which a lot of people might be saying, but Lily's not a good healer. Why is she seeing this reduction? Well, Lily's actually been seeing a resurgence in high-level play. After they made the change where they lowered the cooldown of her W, she's been a lot scarier. So they're making two quick changes of lowering her healing just a little bit to keep her utility, as well as lowering the duration of her slow, and I think this is to make it to where her level 4 is a little bit more competitive without buffing the other talents of a hero who already has a high win rate. They want to lower things a little bit, making it a little bit more competitive. Lucio is seeing some pretty welcome changes. They're taking this and making it baseline, as well as they are reducing the cooldown and mana cost of his E, so he can kind of heal a little bit more often during fights. Even though his healing's not going to be quite what it used to be, he can at least do bigger heals more often, or bigger movement speed more often. And honestly, with the extra 5%, you're essentially giving everyone Lunara speed, even when you're not using your E. So in general, I feel like you will just use your E a lot more for healing, and just your W for quick movement speed increases. Tyrande is... The main problems with the Tyrande right now is a mix of the blow-up compositions, where you stun someone immediately, and then Tyrande follows up by another stun, an armor reduction, and the whole team just just converges on that one target. That's the first major problem of Tyrande, and the second major problem is armor stacking, where you're able to give someone a lot of spell armor before they take a lot of damage. So someone who normally you would burst, like a Butcher, an Illidan, a Zul, even a Tychus, someone that you would try to burst through very quickly, that would kind of heal themselves back up very fast if you can't burst them, would get a decent amount of armor enough to where they couldn't be bursted. Generally, Tyrande has been going through and giving enough spell armor to where they can't be bursted, and then they survive through it and kind of dominate everyone from there. So they're trying to fix those. They're increasing the cooldown of her stun to try to mitigate from blow up comps, making it to where you don't want to just keep throwing your E out to get stacks, but instead you have to save it for that one opportunity. They're reducing the duration of spell armor, which will save from the opposite of the blow ups, as well as they're lowering her healing just a tad, and they are also increasing the bonus maximum range damage from 150% to 250%, in case you do want to pick up that, where you can kind of poke someone from a long range who's trying to channel something and do a huge chunk of their health. Ice Blade's arrows is seeing just a slight nerf, so we might see a little bit more of the range talent. Uther's getting a little bit more into his feminine side, and I guess more of his sadist side, as he is going to be able to stun for a longer duration. This change seems very small, but it's actually pretty huge. Purely because of the way that his stun reduction talents work, he is going to have a much, much higher stun uptime throughout team fights. Before, he could kind of stun people for something like 10% of a team fight, but because he's going to be able to stun people longer, as well as their stun, so he's going to be able to get more auto attacks off on them, that 10% might actually be doubled because of this change. So he could almost stun people for 20% of a team fight, or at least one particular person. Looks like my patch actually came through. Artanis is seeing just some cooldown reductions, as well as some mana cost reductions on his swap, as well as some mana cost decreases on his 13 talent, making it less likely that people need to pick that talent. Blaze is getting pushed more into the main tank area with increases of armor, more slow amounts, as well as less damage on his oil, as well as he's getting lower cooldowns on his stun. If you combine this with the talent that he already has at, level 16, it's going to be a lot of stuns coming out of Blaze. So I think that in general, we're going to see a huge chunk of another big increase of Blaze main tank, while none of these things really stop him from being a solo laner. The biggest change is that this damage reduction is also going to slow his wave clear until level 7 when he gets Crossfire, which that kind of deals with his thing without lighting fire. Dahaka is, again, just like what I said with Falstad, getting a nerf to the global, but no buffs to his actual abilities. I kind of disagree with these changes, but who am I? I'm not a balance patch person, a balance change person. Mal'Ganis is seeing some quick changes, just slight nerf, and slight nerfs all the way across the board, and then slight buff on one of his level 16 talents. They didn't really hit any of his major talents, which I actually kind of prefer this. His talents were strong, but none of them were OP. It was just the fact that they worked really well with what he already had, so I like to see them doing slight nerfs in these areas instead. Then some general bug fixes. So let me know in the comments below if you agree with the changes, and if there was any of them that you didn't really agree with. I agree with the majority of them, other than maybe the global changes. Some of them were pretty surprising. I like that they're looking at Uther. I like that they're looking at Lucio, as both of them. Uther hasn't been used as a tank lately hasn't been used as a healer lately in the meta. He's been used as a tank, so I like that they're looking at him for multiple areas. The buff that he got not only helps the tank Uthers, but it also helps the healing Uthers out there too. And this Lucio change just seems generally pretty good. They're not bringing him back to the point where he was OP, but they are looking at other areas where he might be able to hit the meta a little bit more in more areas. So generally, I like the majority of the changes. The only ones that I'm not sure about are these hits to the global heroes like Zag, Falstad, and Dahaka. But yeah, let me know what you think, and feel free to subscribe if you ever want to stay updated on all of the patch notes, and I'll have a link to this in the description if you want to read it yourself. Thank you again for watching, and feel free to check out any of my other videos.